I never expected a school trip to end with a quiet conversation in a hotel lobby that changed how I saw myself. When my son's teacher stopped me under the warm lights, asking for just a moment, I thought it would be about schedules or homework. It turned out to be about something much deeper, and neither of us saw it coming. Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from tonight. And if this kind of real, reflective storytelling speaks to you, please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It truly helps more than you know. Now, let me take you back to that evening. I was standing near the front desk of the hotel, holding a paper cup of coffee that had long gone lukewarm. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and lemon cleaner, the kind of place that tried hard to feel welcoming after a long day. Parents were drifting in and out, tired from the school conference that had filled the afternoon with folding chairs and earnest conversations. I remember thinking about my son upstairs, probably sprawled across the bed, shoes still on, scrolling through his phone like the world couldn't touch him. That's when I heard my name. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to make me turn. It was him, my son's teacher. Standing a few steps away, jacket folded over his arm, looking like someone who had been holding something in all day and finally decided to set it down. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "I know it's late." I did. Of course I did. At my age, minutes feel different. They're less about the clock and more about whether you choose to notice them. We moved to a pair of chairs near the window, where the city lights blinked like patient listeners. He thanked me for sitting, then paused. The silence wasn't awkward, just careful. I could sense that whatever he wanted to say mattered to him. He told me he hadn't meant to catch me like this, that he usually kept things professional. He laughed softly at that, as if reminding himself of a rule he respected. Then he spoke about the day, about teaching, about how sometimes carrying everyone else's expectations can feel heavier than people realize. His words weren't dramatic. They were honest. And something about that honesty made me listen more closely. I found myself responding in the same way. I told him about being a parent later in life, about learning how to let go while still showing up, about how strange it is to be seen mostly as someone's mother, even when you've lived a whole life beyond that title. He nodded, really nodded, like he understood. The lobby grew quieter around us. The coffee machine hissed in the distance. I noticed the lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind you get from smiling often but thinking deeply. He noticed, I think, the steadiness in my voice, the way I no longer rushed to fill every pause. When he finally stood, he looked lighter. "Thank you," he said. "I just needed a moment to be human." As he walked away, I stayed seated, feeling something settle inside me. It wasn't excitement or regret. It was recognition, a reminder that even in ordinary places, unexpected connections can offer clarity. That night, as I rode the elevator up to my son's floor, I realized I'd learned something new about myself. And that was only the beginning. I didn't expect to see him again that evening, but life has a way of looping back when you're not paying attention. Later, after my son finally fell asleep, I went back down to the lobby. Not for any grand reason. I told myself I needed fresh air, maybe a refill of that terrible coffee. Truth was, the room felt too quiet, and my thoughts were louder than I liked. The lobby had changed its mood. The bustle was gone, replaced by a low hum of night staff and the muted glow of lamps. Outside the tall windows, the city looked softer, like it had lowered its voice too. He was sitting at a small table near the corner, papers spread out, glasses perched low on his nose. For a moment, I considered turning around. I didn't want to intrude. But then he looked up, surprised, and his face relaxed when he saw me. "Still awake?" he asked, almost amused. "Apparently," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Mind if I sit?" He shook his head. "Please." We talked again, but this time it felt different. less like unloading a burden and more like two people comparing notes on life. He told me about why he became a teacher later than most, how it wasn't the plan he'd started with. I shared pieces of my own detours, the marriage that taught me resilience, the quiet strength it takes to start over without making a show of it. What struck me most was how carefully he listened, not waiting to speak, not nodding out of politeness, just listening. At this stage of my life, that kind of attention feels rare, almost precious. At one point, he laughed and said, "I forget sometimes that parents have whole stories outside the classroom." I smiled. We forget that teachers do too. There was a gentle tension there, not uncomfortable, just aware. Like standing on a bridge and feeling the wind, knowing the ground is solid beneath you. We were respectful, mindful of boundaries, yet honest in a way that surprised me. When the clock behind the desk chimed softly, he gathered his papers. "I should let you get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's a long day." As we stood, he hesitated. "I'm glad you came back down," he added. "Tonight helped more than I expected." Walking back to the elevator, I felt steadier than before. Not because something had started, but because something inside me had been acknowledged. I slept deeply that night, unaware that the next day would ask even more of my understanding. The next morning arrived quietly, the kind that doesn't announce itself but simply waits for you to catch up. Sunlight slipped through the hotel curtains, pale and forgiving. My son was already awake, asking about breakfast like it was the most important meeting of the day. Life, I reminded myself, always keeps moving. Downstairs, the dining area was filled with soft clinks of plates and low conversation. Parents gathered in small groups, talking about schedules and plans for the drive home. I poured myself some coffee, stronger this time, and turned around just as he walked in. We exchanged a look that held recognition without expectation. Just a nod, a small smile. It felt right that way. Later that morning, during the final session of the conference, I watched him from the back of the room. He spoke calmly, confidently, guiding a discussion about learning styles and patience. I saw him not just as my son's teacher, but as a man who cared deeply about the work he chose to do. It changed how I listened. After the session ended, people lingered, asking questions. I waited until the room thinned out before approaching. This time, it was me who asked, "Do you have a moment?" He did. We stepped into a quiet hallway where the carpet muffled our footsteps. There was no rush in our conversation. We talked about my son's progress, yes, but also about how children sense more than adults give them credit for. He shared a story about a teacher who once changed his path with a single kind sentence. I told him how I still remembered a similar moment from my own childhood, decades later. There was gratitude between us. Mutual, unspoken, but clear. Before we parted, he said something that stayed with me. "Sometimes," he said, "the adults learn just as much as the kids. We just don't get graded on it." On the drive home that afternoon, my son chatted in the back seat, full of observations and half-formed opinions. I listened, truly listened, feeling more present than I had in a long time. The weekend hadn't given me answers, but it had given me perspective. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. By the time we returned home, the weekend felt almost dreamlike, a soft bubble of quiet moments and unexpected conversations. The city's familiar streets rolled past, but I carried the hotel lobby, the soft light, and his words with me. Life at home was busy, noisy, and full of routines, yet something inside me had shifted. The following week at school, I found myself thinking about him, not in a distracted way, but with a kind of warmth that made ordinary errands feel lighter. When my son came home, animatedly describing his lessons, I noticed the little things, the pride in his eyes when he mastered something new, the way he recounted stories with sincerity. I realized that my connection with his teacher had reminded me to pay attention, not just to my child, but to the world quietly unfolding around me. A few days later, I sent him a short thank you email. Nothing long, nothing formal, just gratitude for the unexpected conversations, for reminding me that reflection could be gentle and still meaningful. His reply was simple. A few sentences that conveyed appreciation and mutual respect, an acknowledgement that those moments had mattered to both of us. Weeks passed, and the memory didn't fade. Instead, it became a quiet anchor, a gentle reminder of the importance of listening, of pausing, of noticing human moments that often go unseen. In the evenings, I would sometimes sit by the window with a cup of tea, letting the city lights blur softly in the distance, thinking about how unexpectedly life can gift clarity. The experience changed me in subtle ways. I approached my interactions with more patience, more curiosity. I noticed kindness in strangers, took time to acknowledge friends, and even in routine parenting challenges, I felt a steadier presence. What I thought would be a brief encounter turned into a lesson about connection, respect, and the quiet impact we can have on each other's lives. Looking back, I understood that the hotel lobby wasn't just a place. It was a moment suspended in time. It was where two people shared honesty without expectation, where trust and empathy quietly deepened. And in the end, it reminded me that emotional connections don't always arrive in dramatic bursts. Sometimes they come softly, in fleeting moments that leave a lasting impression. I carry that weekend with me now, a gentle memory that continues to shape how I engage with the world. And whenever I see my son learning something new, I think of the teacher who approached me in the hotel lobby, and I smile, grateful for the lesson in humanity that unfolded when I least expected it.